She cheated on me, but I never expected her secret life to unfold like this. I thought I had it all until the first text made me question everything. I remember that day vividly, the kind of day where nothing seems off at first glance. The air smells like a warm autumn afternoon, and you're convinced your life is exactly where it's supposed to be. I was sitting on my small but cozy couch in my Chicago apartment, nursing a cup of too sweet pumpkin latte I had grabbed from the coffee shop downstairs. My phone buzzed, and as usual, it was her, Emily, my girlfriend of almost 3 years. The Emily everyone thought was perfect, smart, beautiful, charming in a way that could disarm even the most guarded person, including me. Her texts were normal at first, flirty and mundane, the kind of messages we exchanged dozens of times a day. But then, out of nowhere, I got a message that stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't from her number. It was from an unknown contact saved under the name E. The message was short, innocent looking. "Can't wait to see you tonight." I froze. My first thought, maybe it was a wrong number. I mean, mistakes happen, right? But the little voice in the back of my head, my gut started whispering, and I ignored it. I pushed the unease aside, telling myself, don't be ridiculous. She would never. For weeks leading up to that moment, things had been perfect, or so I thought. Emily and I had built what most of our friends called relationship goals. We were the couple who laughed too loudly in restaurants, shared too many photos of brunches and sunsets on Instagram, and held hands in ways that made strangers smile. I loved her more than I'd ever loved anyone. And for a long time, I thought she loved me back in the same way. And that's why the little things didn't make sense at first. Emily was usually the kind of person who would text me back instantly, no matter where she was. Yet, lately, she had started taking longer to respond. Sometimes hours, sometimes disappearing entirely for a whole evening. She would get these late night calls and step out of the room, muttering about work or her friend needing help. At first, I didn't question it too much. I thought it was reasonable. We both had our lives after all, but then came the inconsistencies. One night, she told me she was staying late at her job, which I knew required very little overtime. When I asked if she wanted me to pick up dinner, she waved me off and sounded almost irritated. Her mood swings became more noticeable, laughing one minute, then distant and cold the next. I chalked it up to stress, telling myself relationships weren't always sunshine and rainbows. I was in love and I wanted to trust her. I needed to trust her. But that text, "can't wait to see you tonight," kept echoing in my mind. The first step, I told myself, was to not panic. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe E was just some harmless admirer, a joke or a misdial. I brushed it off and went about my day, convincing myself I was overreacting. But over the next few days, my unease only grew. I started noticing subtle things I had never paid attention to before, like how she would sometimes leave her phone face down on the kitchen counter, her thumb hovering nervously over the screen, or how she would leave the room suddenly when it buzzed. Once, she forgot to close her browser, and I caught a glimpse of her messaging someone whose name I didn't recognize, deleting the conversation too quickly for me to see what was there. The little voice in my head, the one I had tried to silence, was screaming now. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus at work. Every notification on my phone made my heart race. And the worst part, I felt ridiculous for even thinking she would cheat. Emily was perfect. Weren't I the luckiest guy alive? But denial only lasts so long. It all came to a head one Saturday evening. I had an errand to run downtown and left Emily at home, saying I'd be back in a couple of hours. When I returned, the apartment was unusually quiet. Emily wasn't there, or so I thought. I called her and her phone rang from the bedroom. I knocked lightly, and when there was no answer, I pushed the door open, just slightly, and froze. Her phone lay on the bed, unlocked, and her messaging app was open. I don't know why I looked, but I did, and that's when I saw it. Messages. Dozens of them from someone labeled E. Texts that were intimate, familiar, flirty. A conversation that spanned weeks, maybe months, full of moments she shared with him that she never shared with me. The casual familiarity made my stomach turn, the kind of betrayal that makes your body feel hollow. I can't stop thinking about last night. I wish I was there with you right now, counting down the hours until I see you again. Each message felt like a punch to my chest, and then the photos. Pictures of her out at dinner, at bars, laughing with this guy in ways that looked so personal, so intimate, it was impossible to ignore. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, my mind raced, and every thought screamed, she's been lying to me. She's been living a life I had no idea existed. For hours, I sat there, scrolling through messages, piecing together moments, trying to understand what I had missed, and the more I looked, the more signs I found. Little breadcrumbs that, in hindsight, had been there all along. Late night exits, unusual cash withdrawals, her sudden obsession with her appearance, her phone secrecy. I had been blind, and now I was forced to face the truth. I called her immediately. The ring echoed in the empty apartment, and she answered after the third buzz. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all that came out was a shaky, "Emily, what is this?" There was a pause, long and suffocating, and then her voice, calm, almost rehearsed. "What is what?" My hands shook as I held up the phone. These messages, these pictures, what's going on? Her silence was louder than any words she could have said. Finally, she sighed, a soft, almost soothing sound. It's not what you think, but I knew it was exactly what I thought. The evening blurred into a haze of confrontation and denial. She apologized, at first vague, then more specific, blaming stress, loneliness, mistakes. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance, like I had misunderstood everything. She tried to make it about us, about the pressures of life, but I could hear the cracks in her story. The logical part of my brain wanted to believe her, to rationalize it away, to cling to the memories we shared, the laughter, the love. But the emotional part, the part that felt every betrayal deep in my bones, was screaming in a way I had never felt before. I spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions of work, sleep, and pretending everything was normal in public. But I wasn't fooling myself. Every time I saw her smile, I thought about him. Every time I heard her laugh, I imagined what moments she shared with him instead of me. And worse, I couldn't stop thinking about how well hidden it all had been. She wasn't sloppy, she wasn't careless, she was calculated, precise, almost terrifyingly so. The revelation didn't just break my heart. It shattered the world I had carefully built around us. My perfect relationship, the one I thought was my dream, was a lie. And as much as I wanted to hate her, part of me was horrified at how normal our life had seemed while this secret world existed right under my nose. I began noticing more things. Small, seemingly insignificant details that suddenly made sense. The mysterious late-night drives she claimed were work meetings. The weekend trips she said were with friends but never mentioned who. The new friends I had never met, college buddies, she insisted, but I later realized she had invented them. My life felt like a house of cards, collapsing piece by piece with each revelation. And yet, amidst the heartbreak, there was a strange clarity. I wasn't blind anymore. I could see the patterns, the subtle signs, the manipulation. I didn't know how far it went, how many layers there were to her secret life, but I was determined to find out. I didn't want revenge yet, not like that, but I needed to understand. I needed to know the truth. That night, I lay awake in our bed, which now felt alien, staring at the ceiling, scrolling through the messages over and over, replaying conversations in my mind. How did I not see this coming? How could someone so close, so intimate, hide a part of themselves so completely? Every laugh, every kiss, every promise felt tainted, and I realized that the woman I thought I knew didn't exist. Or maybe she did, but only for me. In fragments she allowed me to see. By the time dawn broke, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her again blindly. I wasn't going to beg or plead. I was going to observe. I was going to dig deeper. I wanted answers. And if she had been living a double life, I intended to uncover every piece of it, no matter how much it hurt. That was the night I realized something terrifying. Trust, once broken, is a labyrinth. And I had just entered it, blindfolded, with no idea where it would lead. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Because I loved her, yes. But more than that, I couldn't accept being deceived this completely. And that's where it all began. The unraveling of my perfect relationship, the journey into a truth I never expected, and the first step into a world where nothing was as it seemed. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The more I looked, the stranger it got, like I didn't even know her at all. After the first undeniable proof hit me, I spent days in a haze, caught somewhere between disbelief and rage. I wanted answers, but part of me still hoped it was all a misunderstanding. I told myself I would confront her, that I would demand the truth, but every time I imagined the scene, I froze. There was fear in that pause. Not fear of her reaction, but fear of what I might discover. Fear of the depth of deception. So I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I started watching. Quietly, carefully. I didn't want to tip my hand. I wanted to understand, and part of me knew that rushing in would only make her hide further. I had to gather evidence, not just for proof, but for my own sanity. It started small. I checked her social media more closely than ever. Emily had always been meticulous about her online presence. Careful posts, curated photos, always smiling, always looking perfect. But as I dug through old posts and tagged photos, I noticed subtle anomalies. Pictures that didn't match her stories. Check-ins at places she never mentioned. Subtle hints in captions that suggested she was with someone else when she claimed to be alone or with friends. One Friday night, I found a series of pictures on her Instagram story archives. She had posted them months ago, from a restaurant downtown, laughing at a dinner that she had told me was a girls' night out. But the photos showed her seated across from a man, someone I didn't recognize at first, closely engaged in conversation, leaning in with a familiarity that made my chest tighten. My fingers trembled as I zoomed in. I could see the tiny details, the way he held his hand in hers, the subtle touch on her arm. Nothing overt, nothing aggressive, but enough to make my stomach churn. I kept digging, cross-referencing the times she said she was busy with work or friends. There were patterns that didn't add up. And then came the messages, texts, emails, even encrypted apps I didn't know she used. At first, I stumbled upon innocuous chats, the kind you'd see between coworkers or friends. But as I sifted through the data more carefully, I realized these weren't innocent at all. These were coordinated interactions, full of inside jokes, planning, moments of intimacy. She had created an entire persona that existed outside of my knowledge, outside of the life we shared. And it wasn't just one person, it was multiple. My mind reeled as I put the pieces together. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a carefully maintained double life. Emily had managed to compartmentalize everything. Her life with me, her life with him, possibly others I hadn't discovered yet. She had created layers, meticulously shielding them from my view. The more I discovered, the more I realized how little I actually knew her. I started documenting everything, like an investigator on a case. I made spreadsheets of her known contacts, cross-checked her social media activity with her work schedule, noticed patterns of trips and absences. There were weekends she said she was visiting her parents, but her phone records placed her downtown or in another part of the city. There were credit card transactions at stores she swore she never visited. Each discrepancy felt like a hammer to my chest, but I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper. I needed to know the truth. It wasn't just about cheating anymore. Something about the way she lived these parallel lives suggested a complexity I hadn't anticipated. I started questioning everything I thought I knew. How had I missed all the red flags? How had she made me feel secure while hiding so much? The trust I had given her, the love I had invested, it all felt like a carefully orchestrated illusion. I began reaching out to mutual friends under the guise of casual conversations. I asked about her weekends, about events I hadn't been invited to, about people I had never met. Friends were either oblivious or careful not to reveal too much, but sometimes they let slip tiny details. Mentions of Emily and some guy, or she's been busy with a secret project. Nothing concrete, but enough to add to the growing puzzle. And then I found it. The first secret that completely changed my perception of her. It started when I noticed a pattern in her emails. She had forwarded receipts, confirmations, and even personal messages from a Gmail account she never mentioned. Curiosity overwhelmed caution, and I opened one of the messages. What I found was staggering. A contract, detailed financial statements, and instructions for a business that she had been running without my knowledge. A business that was not only legitimate, but profitable, involving clients and transactions I had never imagined she could manage. She wasn't just hiding affairs. She was hiding an entire identity. A professional, independent, secret life that was thriving behind the scenes, while I believed she was just working normal hours at her corporate job. The realization hit me in waves. I felt awe at her capability, anger at the deceit, confusion at the layers of her life I had no idea existed. And then came the more personal secrets. Emails and messages that weren't strictly financial or business related, they were deeply personal. They revealed interactions with other men, detailed plans, meetings, and rendezvous she had arranged, often coinciding with the times she told me she was unavailable. The depth of it stunned me. She had become a master at hiding in plain sight, creating plausible stories for everything while maintaining multiple lives. I sat in my apartment for hours, piecing together a timeline. Each day, each hour, each interaction started to make sense in a horrifyingly coherent way. The smiles she gave me, the late nights, the excuses, they weren't random or innocent. They were carefully calculated to keep me in the dark, while she orchestrated a life I hadn't even known existed. My emotions were chaotic. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand the truth, to break the cycle. But another part, a darker, more methodical part, urged patience. If I wanted the full picture, I had to observe, gather evidence, understand the extent of her deception before making a move. I couldn't just react, I had to strategize. I began mapping out her interactions, noting patterns, reconstructing timelines. There were gaps in her schedule that didn't make sense, trips she never mentioned, and contacts that only appeared when I dug deeper. The complexity of her life was staggering. She wasn't careless, she was meticulous. Every lie had a layer, every story a backup explanation. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't about impulsive cheating. It was about control, manipulation, and secrecy. By the end of the week, I had compiled a document of everything I had found, a digital map of her double life. And then, just when I thought I had a grasp on it, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. I was checking her online banking account, a separate, hidden account I hadn't known existed, when I found transactions that didn't make sense for normal expenses. Payments to locations I couldn't identify, transfers to names I didn't recognize, large sums moving in patterns that suggested more than just a personal indulgence. My heart raced as I realized the implications. This wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was financial. Something bigger was happening, something she had been concealing for months, maybe years. And that's when I found the photo, a single image hidden deep in her cloud storage that tied together all my suspicions. She was with a man I had never seen before, in a luxury apartment holding what looked like a business contract, with stacks of cash in the background. Her smile in that photo was the same smile she gave me, but now it was different. Calculated, confident, untouchable. I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning. I had suspected infidelity, yes. But the scale of her deception, the layers, the hidden life, the finances, it was beyond anything I had imagined. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was living a parallel existence that I had no access to, no insight into, and no control over. And the terrifying part, I realized this was only the beginning. If she had managed to hide all this from me for so long, what else was she capable of hiding? How deep did the rabbit hole go? The more I looked, the stranger it got. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a puzzle I didn't know how to solve, a maze I had entered without a map. Sitting there, staring at the image, I felt a mixture of fear, anger, and a reluctant admiration. She was brilliant at deception, meticulous in her planning, and completely untouchable. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, a spark ignited. I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I knew one thing. I had to understand her world, piece by piece, before I could make any decision about what to do next. That night, I lay awake, scrolling through every bit of information I had gathered, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman I had discovered. They were not the same. They were never the same. And I realized with a sinking feeling that my life had changed forever. The puzzle had begun, and I had no idea where it would lead. Nothing I found could have prepared me for what came next. After days of digging, piecing together every message, transaction, and photo, I decided it was time. I couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore. I had to confront Emily, not in a blind rage, not in a panic, but with purpose. I needed answers. I needed the truth. I remember standing outside our apartment door, my hands gripping the handle, heart hammering, adrenaline coursing through every vein. The whole building smelled like the faint scent of burnt coffee and stale air, but I barely noticed. I was focused entirely on the conversation I was about to have, the confrontation that could either end everything or shatter what little stability I had left. When she opened the door, she smiled that smile, the one that used to make my heart stop, the one I had once trusted implicitly. But now, under the weight of what I knew, it felt like a weapon. "Hey," she said, tilting her head, casual. "Everything okay?" I stepped inside, shutting the door quietly behind me. My voice was calm, almost eerily so, but inside I was anything but. "We need to talk. Now." Her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something I couldn't read. "About what?" I held up my phone, letting the screen glow between us. "About this. About everything I found. Emily, don't lie to me." She sighed, the kind of sigh that sounded practiced, patient, like she'd rehearsed it for years. "You've been snooping. Call it what you want," I said, trying to keep the trembling out of my voice. "I've seen the messages, the photos, the accounts. I know about the guys. I know about the hidden business. I know you've been living a life I had no idea existed." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she smiled, small, almost sweetly. "I didn't think you'd notice. I didn't think you'd ever look that closely." Her words hit me like a punch. She knew. She wasn't careless. She was aware of the possibility of being found out, and yet she had done everything to manipulate and control the narrative. My anger surged, sharp and hot, but I held it in check. I needed more than emotion. I needed clarity. "What is all this?" I asked, pointing to the scattered evidence I had compiled over the past week. Emails, photos, financial statements. "Who are these people? Who are you really?" She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms, her calm almost maddening. "I told you, it's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly, hollow. "Not what it looks like? Emily, I've seen the texts, the photos, the transactions. You've lied to me every step of the way. How is that not what it looks like?" She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with something I couldn't identify. "Because you don't understand the full story. You're only seeing the surface. You're looking at breadcrumbs, not the whole meal." I froze. My gut told me she was about to pull something deeper, something I hadn't anticipated. And she did. Over the next hour, she told me stories that twisted my understanding of her life entirely. Half-truths, careful omissions, and emotional manipulation. She spun a web that made my head spin. She claimed some of the men were business associates, that certain transactions were investments, that she had reasons for secrecy that were protective, strategic, and, most painfully, for us. Every sentence was designed to confuse, to make me doubt my own judgment, to plant seeds of guilt. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel it in my bones. The inconsistencies, the calculated calm, the rehearsed charm. She wasn't just cheating emotionally, she was playing a game, and I was the only player blind to the rules. I left that confrontation more confused, angrier, and heartbroken than I had ever been. And as I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling that had once felt like a sanctuary, I realized the depth of her deception went beyond mere infidelity. She wasn't just hiding affairs. She was orchestrating a life that included financial exploitation, secret meetings, and possibly even manipulation of people I hadn't discovered yet. The realization hit me in waves. I remembered a transaction I had stumbled across, a transfer to a name I didn't recognize, a large sum that didn't make sense. I dug deeper and discovered she had been managing a separate account where money moved in patterns that suggested she was taking advantage of someone, maybe unknowingly, maybe intentionally. The thought made my stomach churn. Was she just selfish, or was she capable of something darker? Then there were the personal messages, the ones that weren't strictly romantic, but controlling, almost coercive. She had managed to maintain multiple relationships simultaneously, and some of them were entangled with financial or professional arrangements I couldn't fully understand yet. I felt sick. I knew I had to make a choice. I could confront her publicly, expose her, humiliate her. I could find every person she was involved with and tell them the truth. But that path scared me. Not just because of her manipulation, but because I didn't know the consequences. I could ruin everything around me in the process, including my own life. Or I could protect myself, step back, and slowly collect evidence, observing until I understood the full scope of her secret life. The rational part of me wanted to do that. The emotional part, a part that still loved her in spite of everything, wanted revenge, confrontation, closure. But I couldn't act on emotion alone. Days turned into nights as I tried to reconcile my feelings with the facts. I replayed the confrontation in my head, dissecting her words, analyzing her expressions. Every smile, every pause, every half-truth became a piece of the puzzle. And as the picture became clearer, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea how deep her manipulation went. It wasn't just about cheating or secret finances. She had created a world where she controlled perception, controlled emotions, and maintained power over those around her, including me. The more I uncovered, the more I realized I was only scratching the surface. And then came the moment that broke me. I discovered a hidden folder in her cloud storage, labeled innocuously, almost as if daring anyone to look. Inside were messages, photos, and documents that revealed an entire layer of her life I hadn't even imagined. Contracts, correspondence with men I had never seen, and detailed plans for meetings, trips, and financial dealings. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating lives, manipulating people, and creating opportunities for herself while keeping everyone else in the dark. I stared at the screen for hours, feeling my world collapse. Emily had become untouchable, not because she was clever, but because she had mastered the art of deception. She had convinced me, and perhaps everyone around her, that she was someone she was not. And the depth of that deception hurt more than any betrayal I had ever imagined. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I saw her, every time I heard her voice, every time I remembered her smiles, it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. And yet, amidst the heartbreak and anger, I felt a spark of determination. I wouldn't let this end without answers. I wouldn't let her manipulate me further. I made a pivotal choice that night. I wouldn't confront her with anger. I wouldn't beg, plead, or expose her to the world just yet. I would watch, I would gather, I would understand. I would see the full picture before making any move. And when I did, I would ensure that I was in control, not her. The moral dilemmas haunted me. Part of me wanted revenge, to ruin her carefully curated life. Part of me wanted closure, to make her feel the heartbreak she had caused. And part of me wanted to protect myself, to step back and preserve what dignity I had left. I realized there was no simple answer, no clean resolution. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war, silent, manipulative, and personal. And I just decided that I would play to win, but on my terms. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I understood something crucial. Emily wasn't just a girlfriend who had cheated. She was a master of control, secrecy, and deception. And if I wanted the truth, if I wanted justice, or even closure, I would have to navigate her world carefully, methodically, and with a clear mind. Nothing I had uncovered prepared me for the lengths she had gone to, the layers of her life, or the brilliance of her manipulation. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to be a pawn anymore. I wasn't going to be deceived again. And with that, I began the next stage of understanding, uncovering, and preparing for the day when all secrets would come to light. The truth had hit hard, but it had also ignited something I hadn't felt in a long time. A determination to reclaim control over a life that had been stolen, piece by someone I thought I knew. I realized the woman I loved didn't exist, but the man I became because of her might be stronger than ever. The weeks following my discovery were the darkest I had ever known. The apartment that once felt like home now felt alien, filled with echoes of laughter that no longer belonged. I moved through the days on autopilot, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a physical force. Every song I heard on the radio, every commercial, every couple walking hand in hand reminded me of what I had lost, or rather, what had never truly existed. I kept myself busy. Work became a refuge, a way to drown out the memories that threatened to consume me. I spent hours reviewing every detail I had uncovered about Emily, making sure I understood her secrets, her manipulation, her calculated deceptions. And yet, with every piece of information, I realized that dwelling on her life was only giving her more power over me. It took a long time, but slowly I began to look inward. What had I learned from this nightmare? First, that trust is sacred, and once broken, it leaves scars that take years to heal. Second, that love, real love, requires more than admiration and smiles. It requires transparency, vulnerability, and mutual respect. And third, that I had the strength to survive, even when the person I trusted most had betrayed me completely. I started rebuilding myself, piece by piece. I focused on health, both mental and physical. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the relationship, finding solace in their support and perspectives. I took long walks around the city, noticing things I had never appreciated. The quiet of early mornings, the way sunlight hit the skyscrapers, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. Life existed beyond her, and I was beginning to see it again. Eventually, I decided I couldn't leave things as they were. Emily needed to face the consequences of her actions, not just for me, but for herself. I had compiled everything, Messages, photos, financial records, and her half-truths from our confrontations. I could have shared them publicly, ruined her carefully curated life, and satisfied my anger. But vengeance felt hollow. I didn't want to descend to her level. I wanted closure, dignity, and justice in a way that preserved my integrity. So I confronted her one final time. Not in anger, not in desperation, but with clarity. I invited her to meet at a neutral place, a cafe downtown. When she arrived, her calm, confident exterior flickered for a moment, as if sensing that this was different from before. I didn't start with accusations. I simply sat across from her, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. She shifted in her seat, finally asking, "So, what is this about?" I looked at her steadily. "It's about everything. About what you've done, the lives you've hidden, the lies you've told me. I've seen it all, and I want to understand why." Her eyes flickered, a mix of defensiveness and arrogance. She tried to explain, to rationalize, to make it about stress, opportunity, mistakes, chance. I listened, silently cataloging each half-truth, each omission, each calculated phrase. When she finished, I didn't speak immediately. I let the words hang, like smoke in the air, suffocating and impossible to ignore. Then I said, calmly but firmly, "I understand now, but I'm done being part of your world. I'm done being deceived. I'm done being manipulated." Her lips parted, but no words came. She realized, finally, that I was no longer a pawn in her game. That was the first victory I allowed myself to feel, not over her, but over my own fear, my own doubt, my own hesitation. Walking away from that meeting, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized was crushing me. I wasn't bitter, not entirely. I was sad, yes, sad for the time lost, for the trust broken, for the love that had been a facade, but I was free. Free to rebuild. Free to redefine who I was outside of her shadow. In the following weeks, I focused entirely on myself. I picked up old hobbies, revisited places in the city I had once loved, and even took solo trips to clear my mind. I began volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding a new kind of connection and purpose. Every small victory, every day I didn't think about her, every night I slept without anxiety, felt monumental. I also began to open up cautiously to the possibility of genuine human connection again. Not because I had forgotten her, not because I had forgiven, but because I had learned the value of discernment. Love could exist without deception, trust could be rebuilt, and I could still be vulnerable, just smarter, wiser, and more aware of my own worth. One evening, as I sat on a park bench watching the city lights shimmer on the river, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the hidden life, none of it defined me. What defined me was the strength I had discovered in myself, the resilience, the ability to rise from heartbreak and rebuild. I thought about Emily, briefly, but without anger or longing. She was a part of my past, a catalyst for change, a mirror reflecting what I wouldn't tolerate in myself or anyone else. And with that realization, the final piece of closure settled into place. Life moved on. I reconnected with friends and family in deeper, more meaningful ways. I found joy in small, unexpected places. A stranger's smile on the street, the first sip of coffee on a chilly morning, the laughter of dogs at the shelter. I started writing again, journaling my thoughts, pouring the pain and growth onto paper, a reminder of how far I had come. And somewhere along the way, I realized that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant understanding, accepting, and choosing to live fully in the present. I had loved deeply, been deceived painfully, and survived fiercely. That strength, that clarity was mine, and no one could take it away. Months later, I met someone new. Not perfect, not flawless, but real, genuine. Someone who didn't need manipulation to keep me close. Someone whose trust I could give freely because their actions matched their words. And as we laughed together one evening, sharing a simple dinner on my balcony overlooking the city, I understood something essential. Love is possible again, but only when you respect yourself enough to recognize it. I picked up the pieces of my heart, painstakingly and deliberately. Some were jagged, sharp reminders of past pain, but they fit together in a mosaic I could finally be proud of. I was stronger, wiser, and finally free. The woman I loved didn't exist, but because of her, the man I became did, and that man was unstoppable. Life had taught me betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation, but it had also given me resilience, clarity, and a sense of self I had never fully known. And in that, there was triumph. Not over her, not over anyone, but over my own limitations, my own doubt, my own fear. As I walked through the city streets that evening, the wind carrying the faint scent of autumn, I smiled to myself. The past had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace, ready for whatever came next, and finally confident in the person I had become. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.